And we're live. It is Thursday, June 11th already. Wow. My apologies for being out of pocket for the last week and a half. I was actually up in Yellowstone and Western Wyoming, um, taking vacation. And there's a reason why we say use your stuff and use your gear. As we got into Yellowstone yesterday, I started hearing the sound of my expedition, and the way the Ford does their on the fly 4-wheel drive is they have a vacuum system. And if you've never driven those vehicles, you don't know that sound, but I know that sound extremely well. So I knew exactly what was going on. And as it was happening, so I flipped over to four auto, and just as soon as I did that, it started hailing, and there was a snowstorm while we were in the middle of the park, waiting for my truck to break down because it's a Ford. So we actually made it 700 and some miles in four auto. So it's probably not designed for that. Probably blew up the 4-wheel drive, but just at the point where I don't care anymore. So but I'll get out and do the repairs. But the other thing that I took up there, I took 7 radios up there with me. I took a VHF, a dual band radio, VHF, GMRS. I took some FRS radios. I took a couple of multi-band handhelds, and my intent was to actually use them around the towns we were in. We used FRS one day, but about 2 blocks, no signal. If there's obstructions, no signal. Those are great for like theme parks and places where there's a long line of sight, but not in a town. GMRS is best in a town. VHF is best for long distance line of sight with repeaters. So I tested a bunch of gear while I was there. But there's a reason why we say use your stuff. And I found a bunch of things that were broken, a bunch of things that just didn't work. I had some, a couple of rangefinders that I took up there. I was going to test them. Those didn't work. So that's the reason why we say go out and test your gear on a regular basis, because you never know what is broken, what's going to be broken, and how much stuff you're going to torque out on the way. And oh, by the way, at 75 miles an hour, because the speed limit in Utah, which doesn't make any sense to me at all, is 80 miles an hour. My magnetic antenna almost blew off the back of the truck. It was saved by the wire that was wrapped around the top of the truck. So luckily I was able to save a $75 antenna.
How many times we got to tell you, sir? Dummy cord your shit.
I know. I was lazy. I threw it up there, and I'm like, it's not going to blow off. It's a strong magnet. Yeah, I know better. But yeah, so it was a interesting trip. Some other things I thought was very interesting is we were in the town of Cody for about 5 days. And if you don't know where Cody, Wyoming is, it's named after Buffalo Bill, and the whole town, and they have a Buffalo Bill theme center there. And it talks about how the hotel, the Laramie Hotel that was there, I think it was what it's called. It was built by Buffalo Bill. He mortgaged it 5 times to keep it open, and now it's an icon of the city. And I got to tell you, it was nice being up there because people are down to earth. They're friendly. Small town. It was a nice experience. So
I have a couple of friends in that area.
Yeah,
great.
Windy, a little bit cold. It was like one day it was 75, next day it's 40. You get those Chinook winds that come down through Montana, and you get all kinds of weird weather, but cool place. Very, very cool place. Anyway, okay, lots to talk about today. I'll be posting a Substack article on all the things that I learned while I was up there, gear wise, and real estate in the vehicle. Can't emphasize that enough. Part of this exercise too was not just radios and comm gear and equipment. It was what real estate was useful in the truck, what wasn't, with a full load. And I'll be writing about that and put that in Substack tomorrow.
So I recently found a PowerPoint class for antenna theory and field expedient antenna stuff from my old LURS unit. If you ever want to either do that as a show, or I can send it to you.
Yeah, we should get Troop and a couple other guys that are radio smart and do a show and walk through the different bands, etc. Because if you don't know it, it's confusing, right?
Yeah.
So, and
Antennas is a big thing too. You
Yeah.
got to know the right antenna.
that's right. In fact, we'll get to that at the end. But I want to start off with, we got lots of stuff going on. We got Michael on here. I want to maximize this time because I know you're still in Japan, right? You're muted. Let me unmute you. There you go.
Yeah, I'm in Japan, and we were talking about something before you just went live about the U.S. southern border. Yeah, preparing to open, and this was obvious from the beginning. I'm not saying this post facto. I was saying it pre facto many times, that if Trump was very serious about stopping the invasions of the United States, the first thing he would do after taking office is start to dismantle United Nations and go after Catholic Charities and HIAS, which is the Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society, Lutheran Services. He'd start to go after all those guys. I was in front of their headquarters down in Panama City at the Ciudad del Saber, which is a city of knowledge, former U.S. Army South headquarters there at Fort Clayton by the Panama Canal. I was in front of the UN headquarters, IOM, specifically saying, right here, if he's serious, this won't be here in a few months. But it's still there. And there's Colonel Watkins. That's who I want to hear. So I'm going to make this quick. I took a bunch of notes last time I heard you talking. It really, and I've spent a lot of time looking at BASF stuff. Anyway, but on the border, I think this invasions have just begun. I think what we've seen so far is actually nothing compared to what's coming. That's why I spent so much time in the Darien Gap down in Panama. And they have created a route, and the route is they've been working to make it even more. They're building a road to Colombia. People keep denying that they're building a road to Colombia, but I assure you, they are building a road to Colombia. Period. Full stop. I'm the one that found it. I took Brett Weinstein down there and Chris Martinson and all kinds of people. Actually, Laura Loomer, who's running around with the president now, she was down there and saw it as well. And Ann Vandersteel, I've had her down there many times and spent a lot of time in the Darien Gap and in Panama. Anyway, this thing is set for Europe and here in Japan and the United States. The invasions, I think, have just begun. When the food shortages really kick off, I think is when you're going to really see invasion like we've never seen before. And it's down to Americans. Americans either defend themselves or they don't. Clearly, there's no, daddy ain't home, just, by the way, when I was studying cults, and I'll be quiet here real shortly, I was over in India studying cults years ago. And I noticed that a lot of the Westerners who are looking for a guru, they would, because I talked with a lot of them. I was in India for about a year, and I was in Nepal for about a year. I talked with so many. And they were, a recurring theme was they were missing a father figure in their life, right? And it's interesting, when Trump got back into the office, notice how people started saying, "Daddy's home." That was the whole "Daddy's home" thing. I'm like, yeah, there's like a naked cry out to, this is your daddy. Daddy's got you under, we're protected now. Border's going to be okay. And, all right, here we go.
That's ridiculous. I saw a lot of your pictures, and in the background, you probably caught this as well, but the public's not going to catch it. They don't know what they're looking for. There were 96 civil affairs guys down there, and that's the Special Operations Civil Affairs Unit. Those guys know how to move large groups of people around. I worked with them. They know how to move a population through an area. They know how to keep the population that's moving funneled into a group so they can get them to a destination, all of that kind of thing. But larger civil affairs units at brigade and above, their biggest job in time of war, or when they're inflicting war upon us, as Mike just indicated, is to move populations off the X, or in this case, onto the X. So that 96 civil affairs was down there, to me, was very upsetting, because I know exactly what they do. I did that mission.
Yeah, and I think there's a bigger piece to this too, right? Like, one of the things we didn't talk about before the show, or actually we started talking about it, is that they haven't dismantled any of the NGOs in the, not only in Panama but here. All the NGOs that were supporting and working with State Department are still in place. None of them have been dismantled. So even though DNI has been down there, director of the CIA, Pete Hegseth's been down there. There's been no action since that time to dismantle any of the NGOs, and that wouldn't be a military function anyway. That would be a State Department function through either FBI counterintelligence, or it would be an organization through State Department that would negotiate with Panama to either revoke their licenses and move them out, or just take direct action. But direct action would be, like you were saying earlier, Michael, is that there was times where things were kicking off, because I remember one time you were like, sent me a picture where you're like in the middle of the street, there's fighting going on behind you, like, yeah, they're fighting here. So
that was the Frontex was fighting in the streets. Actually, Masako and I were out in the middle of that in Panama several times, and they're very violent, actually, but we had no problems, interestingly. But what Steve just said was so important. It seems trivial, but it's like a major piece of the puzzle. The 96 Civil Affairs was down there, and it's interesting because Petraeus actually introduced me to the Southcom commander, Laura Richardson. She's not the commander anymore, but she's very woke, super, super woke. And I checked into her. We would chit chat back and forth, but I never asked to meet her because I just, I mean, they're not doing anything to shut it down, right? So basically, it would be a one-way street on information, from me to them, but they would not use that in the best interest of the United States, was my assessment.
Yeah.
There has been no action by Southcom since its creation to stop the CIA's activity in Latin America at all.
I can confirm that.
They have facilitated it. I'm not sure all of the people, certainly the senior leadership. And if you go back and when I first heard Richardson talk, she was given a speech about basically saying her job was to exploit Latin America for American companies. That's basically what she said in her speech. And I was dumbfounded by that, because that is not the job of a combatant commander at all. It has literally nothing to do with your job. But she was telling people that was her job in that capacity. But if you go back and you look at several of the last probably 10, and I did, Southcom commanders, they have very specific grooming criteria for them. Mm-hmm. And they are there not to facilitate the war on narcotics or security or anything like that. And it's crazy. But I do want to ask a question. Do you not think that taking all of USAID's money, which is how a lot of those NGOs were being funded, is not significant?
Well, it's significant. I mean, we've talked about it several times about the impact, but they haven't institutionalized the changes, and they've moved USAID under state now. So the visibility that was there before is not the same as it was. They've killed some of the programs, but they haven't institutionalized anything in Congress.
Well,
so
go ahead. You can still see all the spending because that's in the contract, the defense contracting system. You can. I've looked at a lot of them that they were canceling, that DOJ was canceling, and they have basically canceled all of the out years on most of the ones that I was investigating. And many of them had to do with trafficking operations, both on the, especially in Latin America, but Africa, I always pay attention to Africa too, because to me, those are the bellwethers of whether the exploitation is continuing at pace or it's being scaled back. Because those have been, over the last probably 20 years in the area that I look at, the most exploited populations.
I would agree with that. I would wholeheartedly agree with that.
Yep.
And the other
Can I ask a question before we Colonel Watkins, you mentioned, this is important, on the grooming criteria for Southcom, Because I've wondered what are the criteria for CENTCOM. I think some of them are pretty obvious. You have to like be madly in love with Israel, but what about the other combat? Like PACOM, and what would be the grooming criteria?
So what I look for is the non-military. So we all have, the internal professional military education. There's 1-year internships at the CFR. There are 1-year internships at the Harvard School that used to be the CIA front that Kissinger created. It now has a new name. MIT,
Columbia.
Columbia is a big one. The London School of Economics, the Rhodes Scholarship, the Fulbright Scholarship. There's several of those that are basically known CIA, the Marshall Scholarship. We were just talking about that on my show a few minutes ago. There's known, basically what I refer to as CIA front educational opportunities. And if you look at their pedigree, not all of them, but a lot of them you can tell, especially anybody that's had a tour at NATO. A lot of nefarious shit goes on at NATO. Like a really lot of, especially the senior officers.
It's like the who's who of clandestine backroom dope deals. And
well, that's where they ran all the stay behind units.
Yeah.
They basically conduct domestic terrorism out of NATO's headquarters. The Allied Clandestine Planning Committee, the Combined Clandestine Planning Committee, was all ran out of NATO.
You mean the FBI and the counterintelligence unit? The FBI missed the domestic terrorists in NATO? Really? I find that shocking.
Well, they're not allowed to touch the CIA.
I know. Nobody is. Not even the president. So, but if I summarized everything I just heard, I heard 3 things. The first one is that they're just going to reopen shop once Trump leaves office, and they're going to start the flow again. Number 2, the bridge that's in Darien Gap that's being built by China is still in progress and will be completed by the time 28 comes around. That said, that there has been some strides related to USAID to remove some of the multi-year funding. And for those of you who don't know how government contracting works, when you sign when the government builds a contract, it's usually 4 to 5 to 6 to 7 years, depending on what it is. And they'll allocate money per year for this contract. And if you kill the multi-year phases of it, your money stops in the year that the contract terminates. So if Doge went in and killed a bunch of those multi-year contracts and they all ended last year, that means that there was no new renewed funding for those programs. So those programs most likely, and usually what happens in that case, and I'll use a couple of different vendors. So Syracuse Research during the Gulf War was a no bid contract. They needed a light counter mortar radar to, track the azimuth of 60 millimeter rounds because they were hammering all our camps. They had like a $300 million contract for 2 years to go proof the concept and build some demos. And they did it in year 1. The contract was extended for 3 years, and they ended up building, I think, for 6 or 7 years, building these radar systems. And then they handed it off to somebody who actually did all the manufacturing. So some of those programs, especially if there's multi-year money, they can go in perpetuity. And we can see the allocation of funds. But in some cases, once that money stops, that organization disbands because there's no way to keep the revenue stream and keep the organization going. So
well, what you need to look for is this has happened in the past. What you need to look for is the foundations step in to pick up the slack. The Rockefeller Foundation, the Rockefeller Brother Foundation, the Carnegie Foundation, the Ford Foundation. They have very large endowments, some of them as big as $1 billion, because they have historically been money launderers for the CIA. I just posted a chart on my X thing This book was written in the it was a William Bloom book. It's called Killing Hope. And he put a pie chart in the back of the book that showed the CIA at the center. It showed all of the money laundering foundations. And then the outside of the circle was where the money was going, like the the Congress for Cultural Freedom, education, the NED, or not NED, NEA, the National Education Association, the Student Association that was exposed for, sending kids overseas. That was the CIA front. And it's very, very interesting to look at that. Of all of the major oligarchs in the United States has foundations. As a matter of fact, I've made the statement. I think it's a requirement. If you, especially the new ones, they were all handed DARPA technology to go open a company. If you look at Facebook or Google or whatever, their agreement is that they have to set up a foundation. And then the foundation is used for basically money laundering to whatever it is that the CIA or this intelligence group, what I call the Praetorian Guard, whatever they want to do, wherever in the world they want to do it to destabilize countries, they use those foundations as part of that laundromat.
Yeah, that actually started under John D. Rockefeller. He moved all of his money into foundations and said, just like Bill Gates and the Gates Foundation, right? I'm going to move all my money to the Gates Foundation, and I'm going to let the Gates Foundation do philanthropic activities around the world, but really he controls all of his
Can I do a little backfill here real quick? Okay, Pop and I did a show on the wives of these billionaires, and there are bored billionaire housewives out there who are easily swayed, and they get these little constellations that form around them. And it's people from Ford and Rockefeller and all these other agencies that Colonel Watkins here is talking about that come in and, we're going to help people. And these women will take billions, literally billions of dollars. I've got all of the numbers. I know we were going to talk about this, I would have brought it up. But there's where a lot of the side money is coming from when they need to funnel funds that aren't as visible. It's going through these housewives. It's coming from these foundations.
Bezos, Lauren Jobs. But Lauren Jobs,
exactly,
unlike some of the others, she is a liberal militant. She is not. She's not just passive and letting somebody else. She's actively engaged.
That is correct.
She was very good friends with Ghislaine Maxwell. So she's one of many, but you're not wrong there.
Now, historically, where this is coming from, everybody's like, when did this start? This started back around 1939 when the Frankfurt School guys got into the CIA think tanks, what would become the CIA think tanks. They were OSS at the time, and it wasn't State Department. No, it was State Department and the War Department. Like, that's what it was in the beginning.
Well,
and these guys got in there, took over the think tanks, guys like Herbert Marcuse and a whole list of other guys. But then when OSS became CIA, this is where Alan Dulles shows up. And Dulles shows up as a station chief in Switzerland, and then works his way into the top position in the CIA. And the guys in the think tanks, along with Alan Dulles and his cronies, begin making like this how the hell to put it, a gauntlet that you have to go through to get into the highest levels. They form this gauntlet where you have to pass all of their tests to get into the highest levels so that they're sure that they have only the ideologically pure. So we have a shadow government inside of our government, and this is all written down. I got all of this out of open source. It's very easy to find. But Alan Dulles is the big linchpin.
I would go back to the Fabian Society with Beatrice Webb. She was one of the original kind of co-partners in the welding of and molding of people. And all of her efforts was to get females into this arena. And that was in the late 1800s. But you're right. It is very important.
I'm
If
talking
you're
more modern era, but yeah, you're right.
yeah, if you're going to do research, is to always look at their family members.
Yes.
And their children.
Well, I think what's amazing is that you're describing the system that's been in place for a very, very long time. This is not a system that developed after Allen Dulles. This was already in place. It was just more institutionalized into
well, they actually just offloaded a system they already had onto the taxpayers when they created the CIA. It is a system they already had. Every oligarch had their own private intelligence and their paramilitary capability. When a country that they were exploiting stood up against them, they just send in their own paramilitary.
Go ahead.
Matter of fact, if you go back and look at some of the exploits, especially in the mining companies, in Latin America and in Africa, you will see that play out. Their paramilitary, there were people that in the original SOE in the UK that families tie back to not just the opium trade in the Far East, but the exploitation of Africa.
Yeah, people forget that the Civil War, for the most part, was fought between regiments that were often funded by private individuals. There are 7 regiments just here in Michigan that were funded entirely by rich guys. And they would get 1,000 guys together, equip them, put them in uniforms. They all agreed on a uniform, and then off they go. So this kind of behavior is a lot closer to our timeline than people realize. And what Colonel Watkins is describing is spot on, but now they've just kind of corporatized it under a government banner.
Well, they offloaded that expense off of their corporate documents onto the taxpayers. That's why the 1913 was so important in the individual tax, because the states would not have tolerated that.
Supreme Court shot down the income tax 4 separate times. Taft, in his letter to Congress, 1910, I think it was, specifically states that it was to get around Pollock v. Farmer in SCOTUS's decision that income tax was unconstitutional. He specifically states that was his intention with the 16th Amendment. This is a deep rabbit hole.
Yes, it is. Before we get too far away from the border, what we were kind of briefly getting into before the show started was, Jan knows Ben Berkwam, and he's back. He's been redeployed to the border, and he's going through these camps with Oscar Blue, which Jan also knows, and going through these holding camps, and they're still being sponsored by various religious groups, which are trying to help find temporary work for these people waiting to come in across the border. And it just goes to show you that even though they took a financial hit, as Ian would say, they're still well funded, and they could probably help support these million or so people at the border for quite some time. And these religious humanitarian figures, so to speak, are not helping. Some of them may be honest and really want to just help the people, but they're not helping. They're making it worse. And if something doesn't change in a major way, even though the flow of illegals, have even come to 1 or 2 a day, which whatever the number is, it does not mean that they're ready to pick up where they left off. And people got to be aware that as much as we all hate politics, the invasion will continue one way or another.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think it's well. I'll let Michael and Roxanne jump in on this one, but I think a lot of this is a waiting game. They're trying to wait out Trump, wait out this administration because they think it's going to change on the other side. I think a lot of the activities that, and Roxanne can talk about the CIA ad nauseum and their activities. But I think there's two things. I think actually there's three things going on right now that we won't see real action on until the middle of next year. One of those is I mean, there is a concerted effort right now to dismantle all the funding for the cartels. I know all of them. There's been a big push, and it's been quiet behind the scenes to remove all the money laundering and deal with the banks laundering money for agencies and for the cartels for the past year. And that's what I would do first, is take away the funding sources so they can't reconstitute, and then go in and start taking out the leadership. So I know that there's been action there. I think that the follow on to that could potentially be going after the NGOs and some of these illicit fundings. But, you know, Michael said something earlier in the show that I don't think most people caught. And Steve, you just said it. There's a lot of religious organizations that are operating NGOs that are funded by agencies and funded by private individuals and the foundations that need to be dealt with. I don't know how you do that unless you take away the funding. I don't know. Michael, Colonel Watson's, and Colonel Johnson, any of you guys got any thoughts on that? And you can look at it a lot of ways. I can tell you from doing counter drug for about almost 2 years, looking at how the cartels communicated, what technology they were using, what they were using for long haul communications and coordination. I can tell you that they were very, very sophisticated, and they have a lot of tentacles into a lot of different organizations within state governments and local governments.
North Korea.
And I can tell you that it was very frustrating to work with some of the agencies. I'll just leave it there. And realizing that they were the ones behind the people we were trying to shut down. So my point of saying that is this is a chess match if that's really going on. And there's going to have to be some very strategic moves that happen before you start taking out individuals. Now, I don't know how you would take out the NGOs in a foreign country without direct action. And I don't know if that's even on the table. I mean, there's lots of ways to look at it. I guess is where I'm going with that. I started going somewhere and completely lost my train of thought.
Well, I'd like to dispel the thought that these religious organizations don't know exactly what they're doing. There is a long history with the primary ones of not only doing this, but much more nefarious things. Mm-hmm. They get no slack. They know exactly what they're doing.
Yep.
Well, I think
wrong.
The way I look at it as there's somebody coordinating their activities. And there is
a coordination factor, but they are not there thinking that they're helping people. No. They are there knowing that they're trafficking people, and they have done it for as far back as I've researched, as far as post World War II. The same nefarious quote unquote charities are there, and they're making bank off of all of these operations.
Many of them were caught on video like 10, 12 years ago. There were a bunch of videos that came out of them trafficking people. And the NGO, it was almost always like a middle-aged woman who was overweight and wearing some bad flower print from Old Navy. Absolutely just, you're welcome. Going off on whoever was filming them and telling them they had no right to be there. And they were extremely aggressive. Well, her minions were taking the trafficked people and scurrying off to wherever they were going. There were a couple of videos like that. It came up.
Well, the people need to understand, in open congressional testimony, the CIA admitted that they infiltrate these religious organizations and have operatives in them, and that they have worked with many of them to orchestrate things. You can just look up Operation Peter Pan in Cuba. where they used the Catholic Church to spread disinformation and petrified the parents in Cuba to the point where they were willing to put their children on aircraft that had never flown in their life and brought them to the United States. And unless they had family, a large portion of these people ended up in foster care and orphanages and all kinds of other things. And they did it to rob Cuba of the next generation of primarily males, which is what the target was, of people to grow up in that society. And I don't care what you think about Castro, not a big fan myself, but to use a church to do that. And then you have all of these missionaries all over the world that are reported as either taken by the government or killed. And people immediately think, well, they were there doing God's work. We have no idea what they were there doing. And because what the CIA has done by doing this is they put every single legitimate missionary that goes abroad at risk, because they have notoriously done this in many different countries. They did it in Vietnam, in the northern area, right after World War II. They orchestrated a mass doing the same thing, psychological operations through the Catholic Church, and moved almost 1 million people to the South to prop up Diem to have this quote unquote fake election, and to basically try to legitimize his being in charge of South Vietnam. And that was almost 1 million people that they moved in a very short period of time into the South. And this is historically a fact. And the fact that they're now doing it to the United States should surprise no one. They've practiced a lot.
Yeah, they use the same playbook over and over.
Yes.
I mean, if it works, why change, right? If it's working, why change the playbook?
It's the way you destabilize a country.
Well, so all of us see it, right? All of us see that this concerted effort to replace the generation of males that are coming in, and they've done it. They've used a variety of lines of operation to do it, right? Political correctness, the education system. They've used the university system. They're using discrimination in the workplace called DEI. I mean, there's a host of things they're doing to destroy the current generation of white males, because this is targeted white males and white females. Let's call it spade a spade. And the replacement theory, and just look at what's going on in the UK right now, and especially what's going on in Belfast in Ireland, right?
So I don't disagree with you, but I think it's much bigger than that. I think it's stabilize our country in order to be able to implement, basically at the end of the day, co-opt the government into this greater one world organism that they want to create. But if you don't control the government, you can't transition into that new framework. They want all sovereignty gone.
Yes.
And I would say
obviously white alpha males is a huge part of that, but it's not just white. We have a lot of very patriotic black males. We have a lot of very patriotic other ethnic groups in America that love America. And while I don't disagree that there's a target, I believe it's a much bigger target.
I don't think it's multi-race. I think it's very, very specific on the race side.
No, they're definitely going after Japanese too, and have been doing it for more than 100 years. 100%. 100%.
I think it's like I said, very targeted towards race.
They're specifically been going after Japanese for more than a century. I mean, they're open about it. I mean, but you bring up missionaries. I got a whole part of my library. So this is from 1813. It's called the Panoplist. Have you ever heard of the Panoplist before? I love these things, man. These are like, I was actually with this senior CIA guy at his house many, many years ago. I was pretty young. He said, if you really want to go to the CIA, go to the Christians in Action, the missionaries. And
Oh, yeah.
yeah,
That's what we called them
Yeah.
overseas, is Christians in action. Yep.
yeah, and it was interesting because when you, so I get a lot of their old stuff. Look at this. This is from 1813, and these are like, I don't know. This is amazing stuff. I love reading their old stuff.
My
It's just,
anger
stunning.
is in the fact that you have old books that I do not have, Mike.
Oh, you
We
got to
should-
get over
man.
that
we should
envy.
compare
You
libraries
got
someday.
to let that go. He's always going to be ahead of you. That's what
Let
he
me-
does. Just let it go.
I want to ask you something specific because this is the right group to ask. It's clear that cults are weaponized. We can all see that. That's obvious. But there must be some that specialize in doing cult. Like, here's an example. You've heard of the Thugies before, right? The thugs.
Sure.
That's where the name thug. I've got quite a lot of these old books on thugs. Usually, they're almost all from the 1800s, and I just suspect that the thugs may. I don't have any evidence to back this up. I might come across it in these old books, but I suspect that thug cult, of which there were different components. It wasn't just one monolithic cult. I suspect that they may have been made by bankers or people in the business that wanted to buy the jewelry that they were stealing. I just have reason to believe that, but not enough evidence to really say that I think that's what was going on. I just kind of smell it in the room. You know what I mean? Like, because you can create your own cult, like as a designer cult. They do it all the time. Antifa, whatever. There's so many we couldn't even. It'd be like taking an inventory of all the insects in the jungle and the Darien. I mean, there's so many cults. They come and go too. Some have a brief life cycle, like last a few years, and they come and go, and they don't leave any real historical footprint.
Except for Jim Jones. That was quite a footprint.
Like Jim Jones, as an example. In fact, by the way, down in Guyana right now, the Chinese are taking that place. I just got a message about an hour ago by somebody who had just met one of the people that was one of the investigators at the Jim Jones thing. He's down in Guyana. But anyway, I read a book on that, by the way.
But you know he was part of the CIA, right? Jim Jones.
I could see where he would be. I mean, I read a book on it. He got that thing going, and he was getting people's their government checks, right? So he was getting people that were getting monthly payments from the government, and he got those sorts of people into his cult. And
he's originally from? Richmond, Indiana?
No, it's been a long time since I read that. I know a lot more now. If I reread that stuff, it's going to look different to me now.
It would look very different because Richmond, Indiana's police chief was Dan Meaderone. And Dan Meaderone is the guy that was down with USAID/CIA in Uruguay. And so he's the guy that got killed. He was kidnapped and killed because he was teaching the national police in Uruguay that basically the CIA had set up how to torture and set up black sites. And they were rounding up all the Tupamares, which were the resistance to the dictator that was in charge of Uruguay. So Dan Meaderone was part of USAID's Office of Public Safety. And if you ever looked into the Office of Public Safety, their mission was to go in and train national police forces for the CIA to this was part of Operation Condor in South America, and they were
real quick, Roxanne, who made the Tupamares? Do you know? Because
it's not a matter of making them. Basically, when the CIA started operations in Uruguay and was supporting this dictator that they had in charge, it was a natural resistance force, almost like the Sandinistas in resistance to Somoza and his corruption. It was a natural organization of patriots in Uruguay that was standing up against their government. So the CIA just kept upping the pressure to quell the resistance. And Dan Meaderone was part of that. And I found it ironic that he went to elementary school with Jim Jones. They've known each other their whole life. Yes, they were classmates. And so Jim Jones starts his religious cult in the Richmond area in Indiana. And he specialized in mixed race. He basically, when he moves this cult out to San Francisco area, he's involved in the MK Ultra experiments out there. There's all kinds of child trafficking. He was approved to be a state foster home. They were putting kids in his cult through the state of California. And Congressman Leo Ryan is the guy that started investigating the CIA's role in this whole thing, and Jim Jones specifically. But let me put another bow on this. Jim Jones, when we overthrew the government in Brazil in the early 1960s, 63, 64, both Dan Miterone and Jim Jones was in Brazil. They were working together in Brazil during that coup. Jim Jones had a fleet of ships that he would take up the river to what we now refer to as Jonestown. That was a terrorist training camp before it was ever the Jonestown MK Ultra continuation site when he brought his religious.
Of course it was. Of course it was.
Yeah.
I mean, that would explain why they were so willing to smoke a senator right there.
Yeah.
So it wasn't a senator, it was a representative. His name was Leo Ryan. And so Leo Ryan is one of the ones that was investigating the CIA. And he was demanding changes in the CIA, doing his investigation in his political district, which was the San Francisco area.
And this was, wait, let's go back. What year was this? This was like 81, 82. I mean, this was a long time, this was in the 80s. I remember reading the book about all of this years ago, but I don't remember.
So did I. But until you understand how this whole operation works, you really don't put any of this stuff in perspective. And so when Leo Ryan started his investigation, Jim Jones, when he was in his Washington office, sent he had moved because he's pissed off at Leo Ryan investigating his stuff. So he moves all his shit to Guyana, and he sends from Guyana one of the females out of his cult, and he pretends that she's a whistleblower. And she comes to Leo Ryan's office and says, hey, I can get you in. I'll sneak you in. I'll do all of this stuff. And they trick him into going to Guyana with like 4 or 5 of his staffers. And several of them got killed on the tarmac there. And there was a man standing next to him that was a CIA agent working in Guyana. And Prouty, in his book, says that the body bags for the massacre was ordered through the Joint Chiefs of Staff the night before the massacre.
I remember reading that, and I dismissed it as there's no way that's real. And now
that's real.
It was absolutely real.
If you go to Guyana's archived newspapers, the coroner from Guyana that went and inspected the bodies the first day says that there was an injection site on the base of everybody's neck. And they were not poisoned because the particular poison that they supposedly put in the fake Kool-Aid would have made their bodies arch backwards, and they're all laid out in a nice little row. And even though the body bags had already been ordered and delivered, they left them out for 2 weeks before they actually did anything with the bodies. So they were nice and decomposing so that you couldn't do proper autopsies on them.
And there, ladies and gentlemen, is why this is such a hard thing to unwind, because there's tentacles that run so deep and so everything across the globe.
That's funny. Okay, Roxanne just said not funny, but let's say interesting.
I was going to say.
Yeah, but
the other funny.
The other funny. Yeah, the one. Yeah, and so I remember many years ago, Green Beret told me that he was down there helping with body collection, and that they were very, very rotten.
Yeah.
And I was like, how would they be rotten? I mean, how quickly can they go? And now with what you just said, they left them out there. I don't remember, I wish we could rewind the tapes and reread everything that we've read
I
years
know.
ago again, and hear all those conversations again. It would mean something else now.
Yes. And that's what I've spent the last 4 years doing, is going back and rereading all of that stuff, because now that I understand how the whole system works, everything looks completely different.
Have anybody seen or know who Daryl Cooper is?
I know that name.
He's the one Bill Bupert follows. He's kind of like the better than amateur historian, but he has gone through and listened and reread, and he did it may have been several 3-hour series on Jim Jones, all the links, listen to all the secret recordings, public recordings. He went through every nook and cranny and did a pretty interesting documentary, I guess you could say, on Jim Jones, and go through. I have only caught bits and pieces, so I'm not going to make a formal opinion, but it's something you probably could check out. And he has his own opinions, but he's done literally the maximum homework, I guess you can do. Read every book, like I said, gone through every document, every audio tape, listened to it over and over and over. So maybe that's something people can check out as well.
I wish I had the kind of time to do stuff like that. That requires so much time.
Yeah. I think he said something like it took him well over 8 months to a year to go through everything. Literally reading every day, waking up, going to sleep with the book in his lap.
The bottom line is it's CIA.
Yeah.
That's
what Daryl Cooper said, though, about when he did the Tucker Carlson interview, and he talked about the religion of the state. That was that's a very pointed statement for a very specific reason. And everything we're talking about is the religion of the state. And when you talk about, you bring in the cults into that, the power that these people have over all of these institutions is that they've embedded believers that are completely immersed in whatever the let's just say whatever the cause is. And there could be multiple different, as Michael says, there's so many cults, you can't catalog them. They're like bugs. They all have different purposes. And part of the hard part of doing information warfare, the hard part of unwinding all of that belief system. Just look at the mind virus that's related to sexual identity. Look at how effective that has been. And they've laced it into climate change. They've laced it into race or religion. They've laced it into marriage and the belief system in the churches. It's very, very hard to unwind that from an information perspective. That it would, you can do things kinetically to get rid of some of these people, but you never get rid of all of them. And just what you outlined with Jim Jones, that shows you how deeply embedded in all these institutions that these people are.
Michael, have you ever done any research into the Moonies?
People accused my wife of being a Moonie. So, so I did a tremendous amount of research to make sure before I would even agree to meet her the first time. Investigated her, actually. And she's not. And she's not. And so, actually, when I go to big protests, around the world, I've learned a few things. I've been to a lot, and I've learned if you go long before, if it's a scheduled protest, if you go long before the protest, you'll start to see that a lot of the formations will show up in advance. And one of the things that they often do is sit on the ground. Actually, I've noticed that in every country. Like a group will meet together, and they'll often have some marker on them, same shoes or the normal stuff, right? So anyway, some of the Moonies at January 6th, they were there actually. And I was there early, and I was like, oh, wow. and they were sitting on the ground. I sat down there and talked with some of them, actually. Fascinating. I don't know much about them other than they are, CIA type stuff. I mean, that's, another,
So their Reverend Moon was, I don't know if you know his whole story, but he was recruited by the OSS originally, and then used by the CIA in the Korean War. And he also is probably the only quote unquote church that owns their own weapons manufacturing plant. And you find a lot of Moonies down in Paraguay. They own like a 400,000 tract of land that just is coincidentally known for drug trafficking. And I find the operations of the Moonies, and now I'm not saying that everybody in the Moonie organization, but Reverend Moon was one of the original founders of the World Anti-Communist League, which was used as a front by the CIA to orchestrate these stay-behind units, specifically in Asia, because it originally started as the Asian Asia something Anti-Communist League. So it after the Asian one was set up, the World Anti-Communist League was set up, and then it morphed into having chapters all over the world. And it was used in conjunction with the stay-behind networks that NATO set up to kind of put them all around the world. And they used the stay-behind networks right as the beginning of the Korean War as a mechanism to orchestrate some false flags that was around that. And Reverend Moon was intimately involved in the aftermath of that, of setting up the KCIA, because in Korea, they lived under a dictator for decades after the Korean War. That was not a democracy at all. Even by the Democrats' definition of a democracy. It was ran by a dictator. And that dictator was in bed with the CIA and used Koreans all over as force structure to destabilize countries. And a large portion of them were from the Moonie Church. And I didn't realize how much he owned in America. And the whole Korea Gate and all of that stuff that happened during the Clinton administration, because Reverend Moon owned the Washington Times for a very long time.
Let me ask you something else. You were talking about the drug trade down in Paraguay. Have you heard of that cult called the Israelites?
Yes.
And are they related at all? Do they work together with those guys, or?
I have not seen them working together with them. It wouldn't surprise me at all. I'm not.
That's a cult that came from out of the blue as well. Apparently, they're not Israeli or anything like that. It's just one of those off-brand Christian outfits, allegedly, but they're in the cocaine business, right?
Because isn't everybody?
Yeah. Speaking of which, I was just last night doing a live stream about coca wine. Vin Mariani and these sorts of things. Have you ever heard of Vin Mariani, cocaine wine?
Yes.
Yeah. Here's one of the postcards. I bought a bunch of these postcards, actually. Look at that.
Oh my
It's a
God.
child with a bottle. I got all kinds of these things. These are originals, actually. I bought more than 100 of the original postcards. This is from the 1800s. This is Coca-Cola replaced these. I've got a lot on Vin Mariani. Go ahead.
You know what's interesting about that? And I learned this in researching Evo Morales and his different political positions. I did not realize that coca, from an indigenous standpoint in Latin America, was a commonly traded entity. They made teas, medicinal teas, that it had medicinal values to it.
Yes.
And
that's what this whole book is about.
Yeah. And that's why the CIA hated Evo Morales so much, is because what he did was he legalized the production of coca for only traditional purposes, for the original intent of it. And he would not allow anybody in Bolivia to sell it to the cartels. And if they were caught selling it to the cartels, he put them in jail. And of course, the CIA liked having Bolivia as a partner in their cocaine production, and that was not okay with them. But I had no idea that it was originally used for medicinal purposes and teeth. As a matter of fact, their biggest market was Europe. Their biggest legal market was Europe out of Bolivia.
That's where the Vin Mariani was from France, and this was the Pope was shilling this stuff like straight up. The Pope was, and I just put it on my Substack actually. But I've got a lot of the original. Look at this. This is from 1899, the Philadelphia Medical Journal, right? And this is 1899, and look at this. On page 2, there's an advertisement for Vin Mariani, which I happened to have open last night, weirdly, and we're talking about it now. So there it is. See that? Vin Mariani. It's an advertisement in the Philadelphia Medical Journal in 1899. Yeah. They were giving this stuff to kids to keep them quiet. Cocaine wine. And President Grant actually was doped up on that stuff.
But the best thing for them is to make it not legal, because then it's covert and they can use it for covert funding.
Yeah. Interesting. All these things.
Go back to the Brahmins and the Pritzkers. They all made money off of bootlegging once it was made illegal, right? They love illegal shit because as soon as you make it illegal, it gives you a whole off-book, non-tax flow of money.
And the Pritzkers are still they're still on the dime, so to speak.
So have you heard me talk about
the Stackler family as well?
I still think this is one of the funniest things. When I was researching all of the fake banks that the CIA set up all over the world, the one that Paul Helliwell set up in the Bahamas called Castle Bank, when it closed, went quote unquote bankrupt, the largest single depositor at Castle Bank, which was 100% a CIA fake bank, was the Pritzker family.
Of course it was. Of course it was. And on a side note, most of this trans, I don't want to say zealotry, is from that family. One of Pritzker's, Governor Pritzker, his brother did a conversion or whatever you want to call it, and has been pushing, using family money to push the ideology into schools, universities.
Well, the current one, because the Fabians talked about that as well.
But they weren't as militant about it, right? It was a line of business for them.
Well, but understand their philosophy. Their philosophy is gradualism. They introduce the idea, and then they put funding behind it. And then through permeations, it grows. It's like planting an oak tree. The Fabians came up with a lot. They're the originals of the eugenics movement as well, as far as
I was just going to say that. Yeah.
Yeah. So their
Colonel Watkins, I'll give you a simple, perfect example of what you're saying that happened to a friend of mine and his 3 daughters. The oldest daughter came home one day from school and decided that, she was non-binary. The second, and that was at 14. The middle child was like 10. And then all of a sudden, because of pressure and looking up to the older sister, decided that she was non-binary and possibly wanted to be a boy. And then the 6-year-old, so all 3 of his daughters went down that rabbit hole. And it started from one, just, slow and, influential. It's demonic. It's absolutely sick.
Yeah.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Oh, no, go ahead. Go ahead. No.
On the Fabians, that's an endlessly fascinating topic. And you've obviously put a lot of study. We should, if you guys are around next Friday, I would like to just hear you talk about Fabians so I can really start. I have this one book. I haven't read it yet, but I had it come in. It's about the Fabians and the Irish question. Yeah. And it's quite fascinating. What are they going to do with the Irish? The Fabians. I don't.
They're going to genocide them, Michael. We've talked about you and I have talked about this.
Oh, I know they're
cracking ad nauseum.
it's been a long process of genocide. When I say, I mean, I'm talking about the Fabians. This book is more than 100 years old, talking about the Irish question. So, I mean, they were talking about it back then. This is, a lot of these things are, these wars are not, we call World War I, World War II. There's actually zero difference between those wars. It's the same war. That's why I just call them process wars. And then there's these standing wars. A standing war is like a standing wave. You could take everybody out of the Middle East right now and just replant other people in there, and eventually they would be at war over Suez and Hormuz and all the oil, because it's a center of the universe on routes and resources. So I mean, so that will create a stand like Panama. You can take everybody out of Panama, replant it, and it'll be another fight, because it's just so critical. Not just the routes, which is critical, but also it's got a lot of copper and everything else under the sun there. So what I'm getting to is that's like a standing war, like a standing wave. And then there's these process wars, which is what Roxanne's always talking about, which is absolutely vital. These are those wars that unfold over at a minimum centuries. I mean, if you're talking 5 or 10 years, we're wasting time. That's like a tactical battle. World War II, on the scale of things, is almost like a tactical battle, actually, on the scale of things. I mean, it's pretty big if you're in it, but on the scale of things, it's just a storm that came through. It's a storm that had a name,
Yeah. Yeah.
Those wars and every subsequent war, and this is my opinion based on what I know about the kind of people we're dealing with, because there is a race-based thing that is true. It is not easy to enslave whites. Ask the Arabs, ask what happened when the Marines showed up, okay, from the halls of Montezuma to the shores of Tripoli. So how do you take care of that little problem there? It is my opinion that a lot of these wars are partially, not entirely, started to get rid of surplus male population from these strong-willed races. All of the European white races, the Japanese, and to pick off leaders from their ranks as well. It's to keep those herds down, if you will.
I've got an interesting book, by the way, called "The Last of the Jews and the Japs," and I haven't read it yet. Al Johnson, I told him about it. He's already read it. It's a fascinating book. The parts that I have read, I mean, "The Last of the Jews and the Japs." There is the idea of enslaving Japanese has been a long dream of a lot of people, or destroying them. And it's game on. This place is being invaded too. And not only that, they're having this, whatever fights that you're having in the United States or Canada or other places, just change the accent and change the names, and it's happening here as well.
A lot of that goes back to, again, like you said, multi-year doctrine that's been at play. I mean, because one of the things that Roxanne's not talking about is how long the Fabian Society has been meddling across the planet, and how long these institutional plans are. That's what I was trying to go towards earlier. Is that's why this is so hard to unwind in the public consciousness, because a lot of these different themes and messages have been growing over decades. I mean,
centuries.
We talk about, and the example I like to use with this is when you talk about cancel culture, right? Remember in 2018, 2019, cancel culture was it was the buzzword for everybody that was being canceled. That started back in the 70s. That wasn't something that started, under Trump or under Obama. That started a long time before any social media company ever came about. And it was accelerated and institutionalized after 9/11. And it was, what people don't understand is a big part of the Patriot Act has nothing to do with taking away personal freedoms. It has everything to do with eliminating the First Amendment.
Can I add something?
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry. When you were, you guys are dragging me back to some of my university education, and I'm thinking back to like some intellectual history classes I had, talking about like guys like John Stuart Mill, going back into the late 19th century. And I think a lot of these ideas that Roxanne talks about with the Fabians started with people like that, like the concept of utilitarianism.
Yes.
And, you know, obviously Karl Marx and his ideas and a lot of the late 19th century thinkers. I feel like a lot of the things we're seeing today are playing out ideas that they were developing back then.
We just did 4 shows on the philosophers that underpin the Fabians. Warhamster and I do a show every Friday at noon, and we did 4 shows to exactly what you're talking about. I mean, and you're dead on.
Okay, I didn't know. I knew for sure John Stuart Mill had to be one of them, but but I feel like it's like you look at what I was taught anyways, like when you come out of the Enlightenment ended, and then you moved into like the beginning of the Industrial Revolution in Europe, and that led to all these kind of philosophers that walk down this path of utilitarianism and everything like you've described. And I feel like that's what we're seeing playing out right now. We're seeing their ideas.
So it also was the first time in history where people had free time, because your post-industrial revolution, people had money, and every one of these asswipe Fabians either had a trust fund or married a trust fund baby, and they had nothing to do all day. They didn't work. None of them worked. They sat around and wrote shit of garbage that promoted socialism and one world government and how to control the herd.
Yep.
Right. There we go. How old's that book?
Look at mine. I have one too, Michael.
God, I'm not in the club. I should have some FOMO going on here.
My bookcase is out of reach.
Don't care.
Yeah. Unmute yourself, Mike.
So
Mike, you're muted.
You're muted.
I'm doing the no talking hearing.
Is yours the Irish one?
No, this is from G.D.H. Cole. It was written in 1952. There's like hundreds of these, and they called them tracts.
I have a couple of them.
They did it on purpose because back in the day they were equating their religion, which was not a religion, but they referred to it as a religion, to regular religions. People were used to getting religious tracts handed to them, out in public, like that. And so they called them tracts because they were creating their own Fabian religion called socialism.
And called what?
It is a religion. It is
socialism.
Tying this all together back to your guys' discussion about 20 minutes ago or 30 minutes ago, where you were saying, Steve, that it's a bad, they're trying to eliminate the white race, basically, which I agree. But I think it's part of what Roxanne was saying is the bigger thing, which is to try to integrate us into this utilitarian world globalist system that she laid out, that like Alex Jones talks about all the time.
I've talked about this particular point before. I'm sorry, this will be very quick. I don't think they're trying to exterminate entirely. I think they're trying to keep the population down and docile. I'm wondering if H.G. Wells, who was actually involved with theosophy pretty heavily, if H.G. Wells
and the Fabians,
and the Fabians, you're correct, was trying to tell us something when he wrote The Time Machine, because you get the Morlocks, who basically had 2 classes, their elites and their soldiers, and the Eloi, who were the docile workers who were also a food supply. I mean, it's a real similar parallel that it looks like they're pushing forward.
So H.G. Wells was telling you what their plan was.
The way the movies tell us what the plans are now.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yep, that's what I'm saying. I'm wondering if he was just outright telling it. This is what's coming.
The end state is in it's in Agenda 2030. Mm-hmm. The end state of what they're trying to reach. They want geographic economic zones that are filled with brown people, that are low IQ, that are easy to control and manage. Yeah. They want the geographic economic zones run essentially by bankers.
Yes.
And they want AI to control everybody's movement and to monitor the population and enforce the rules. And if they have androids by that point that can do a bulk of the work, that's what they're going to do, and they want to put everybody on universal basic income. That's what they want, and that's not a vision. That's it's not a vision of what they want. That's the end state they're reaching. But go ahead.
I actually stumbled across a really, really concrete example of this back, I think it was 3 years ago when that book came out, the trans girl, and everybody was trying to force it into libraries and everything. I ended up researching that particular individual. Both of her parents work at elite academies in the Sonoma Valley. I looked up those academies. These kids, by 4th to 6th grade, are learning about Rome. They're learning about the Constitution. They're learning multiple languages. By 6th grade, they're doing graphing, like algebraic and calculus and things like that, right? And our kids, what are our kids learning about? And I said this in front of the city council when we were trying to keep the book out of the damn libraries. I looked them right in the eye and said, their kids are learning all of this stuff. What are your kids learning about? They're learning about lube. And you could have heard a pin drop. But the point is, keep that lower class down. The elites are getting the education that we used to get. I know I had that education back in the 70s in public schools.
It's elimination of the middle class.
Yes, that's exactly what it is.
Well, look at
yeah.
All you got to do is look at countries like Mexico or Brazil to see the future they have planned for us. Massive underclass and a small minority elite that rules over them. I mean, that's basically Mexico.
Yeah.
And a lot like Brazil too.
And it's been that, I mean, all of Central and South America are that way, right?
Somewhat, not all as much as those two, I think.
For a time period. I mean, I can think back when El Salvador was just as bad as Mexico is right now. I can think back of when, Colombia was pretty much a stable society before the cartels, and then the cartels showed up, and now it's the Wild West.
It's interesting. Like, look at Argentina with Milei. Like Jan has pointed out with like Milei Kowski, the president. Suddenly Argentina is changing because the Zionists want it to change. And you can see, I mean, I've been there. I was there just a few weeks ago, and you could see visible changes. I hadn't been there for about a year and a half since then, and you could definitely see changes in Argentina already.
What sort of changes? Draw us a picture.
Just like it's cleaner. Things look like they're actually getting fixed. It seems like things are working better. I mean, just subtle things you see compared to when I was there the last time, where it seemed like the place was just slowly falling apart.
Are they building themselves a retreat? I'm wondering.
Yeah, well something.
That's basically what happened in El Salvador. None of this has to be this way. It's that way because the leadership in the countries have sold their souls to the oligarchs and allowed them to come in using paramilitary forces to control the people. None of it has to be that way.
Right.
I mean, if you go back to Chile before we overthrew their government, Chile was a thriving country. It had been a democracy for a very long time. They had legitimate elections. They had a middle class. They had rich people there. They had poor people there. They had a normal country.
Argentina used to be incredibly wealthy.
Yeah.
There used to be a saying, as rich as an Argentinian.
Yeah.
And I've got old maps of their old train system. They had a very vibrant train system, much better than they have now. It was a rich country. Argentina is named after silver. I mean, that's what it's actually named after. And there you go.
And every time I've gone there, I mean, I've been flying there for over 8 years, and you can tell that it was once a much richer country. If you just walk around, like they have these intricate tile like sidewalks, and you can walk around and you'll see like where the tiles have been smashed, and they've been that way for decades. But like once it was like immaculate. Like you can see that once it was much prettier. but nothing's gotten fixed. But it
Here-
does seem like things are getting fixed now there a little bit.
Here's one for you. Detroit used to have elaborately tiled streets thanks to Pewabic pottery. There are still remnants here and there down in the meatpacking district, but the majority of it has been torn up. We had several streets that were tiled exactly like you're describing.
Yeah, they'll make the areas that they want to. The elite will make the areas that they want to hang out in. They'll make those pristine, and everything else will be
Yes.
a shithole. That's the game plan. I mean, you can see. I mean, here's the proof in the pudding. I mean, I just read like 3 minutes ago. I was trying to look up some of the Fabian stuff while you guys were talking, and Elon Musk is the first trillionaire. I mean, what does that tell you? That's exactly the point that we've been talking about for the past hour. Is that the middle class is being destroyed completely, and it's going to be the peasants and the aristocracy. And what kills me is this fucking aristocracy has been picked by the CIA.
Well, I think you have it backwards. I think the aristocracy
Yeah, the aristocracy predates the CIA by quite a while.
Nope, I like
Here's
blaming the CIA like the Clintons, right? I want
CIA is
everybody
just
to blame.
Here's an
CIA is
anecdote.
I
obviously
want my
just
stereotypes.
one of their. The CIA is just a company intelligence operation.
Yeah.
I mean, they can be dismantled by the aristocracy.
Yeah, I know that, but I want to blame
Yeah.
them for everything.
Blame
I got
Canada,
my
Steve.
bias.
I got an anecdote that's kind of useful. I think I've noticed from flying all over the place is like the way to know if you have a strong middle class in a country or not is how many boats do you see on lakes and rivers when you go to a country? Because if you go to, like, I've flown over Cuba, flying at Brazil, very few boats. They'll have plenty of super yachts in their super yacht marina, but there's no average Joes racing around on jet skis and water ski boats and everything. But you go to the United States, I mean, that's the one biggest thing I'd say compared to anywhere else in the world is we got every lake is covered in the summer with boats. Or if you go to New Zealand, they got lots of boats. Or if you go to Norway, they got lots of boats.
Michigan has a third of the boats that used to be on the water now.
Sure. Because they're so damn expensive. They're getting more and more expensive. But I feel like if you see a lot of boats, then you know there's a strong middle class because that means the average Joe.
You know what's funny that you said that? That was one of the indicators in Chile after the coup. And all of these oligarchs came in and snapped up all of the real estate and industry through corrupt deals when what's his face, whose name's escaping me right now, was installed by the CIA. All of the middle class people that had their own fisheries and stuff like that had boats. And when the Norwegian billionaire guy that raises salmon decided to come down there and scarp up all of the in the very southern part of Chile, created all of these salmon farms that they were, because Chile didn't have the same standards that Norway did for raising salmon. They were applying, if you eat Chilean salmon, you're eating a medicine cabinet. Because they put antibiotics in them because they put them so dense into the cages. But salmon is one of the only fish that eats other fish. And so they had to go then destroy the fisheries along the coast of Chile to feed the salmon farms. And it destroyed all of the middle class that was along the coastline. And they had to sell their boats. They had to sell their companies, everything for these big oligarch salmon farms.
Sounds a lot like data centers.
You know, I think it's just a matter of time, by the way. This crosses my mind occasionally. When some oligarchs are sufficiently upset with other oligarchs, they're just going to unleash drone storms on their yachts, you know, and these big, you know, you ever go to these big yacht farms, you know, and it would be nothing for them to actually just wipe out billions of dollars worth of yachts in minutes in just one little place, you know.
Yeah, you could take out a bunch of them in Monaco.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
It's just a matter of time until some oligarchs start going at each other on those things.
Well,
That's kind of EM Burlingame's whole point. with the resentfuls and what's the other term he
Estrogens.
uses?
He has so many names. The
Yeah, I
upper
know.
and the lower and the upper and
Yeah, I mean, basically, his theory with the whole high table thing, that comes straight from John Wick, the John Wick story.
Yes.
Well, he's not wrong though, because when you talk about, especially, and I learned this in DC, when you talk about the elite, there's strata, and there's
yes.
there are tiers,
Definitely strata.
and there are rules within those tiers that if you're in that strata, you have to abide by. I mean, it's a culture that and
There's a pecking order.
yeah, it's kind of like it's kind of like astrology for me, right? I've had it explained to me so many different times, and I still don't get it. It was the same way with this, and then when it finally clicked is when I watched it in action.
Yeah.
I mean, there is protocol, there is procedure, there's way you greet people, there's a way that people respond to you if you're in a lower strata versus a higher strata. There is something to that, right? And one of the things that EM talks about, which I firmly agree with, is that there's a level of conflict at that within those levels of strata that creates an order that the order can't be disrupted. At least it can't be disrupted right now. At a certain point, it can be disrupted. But there's, like I was saying earlier, there's a lot of chess pieces and a lot of plays that have to happen before you can start to affect that layer of strata, because then other people move in and fill the voids. Like one of the things I want to do, I want to see a kill order on Bill Gates. I want to see that guy taken off the board, right?
Wouldn't mind that.
Well, I'm just using that as an example. He's just one of many, right? But his point is very well taken when it comes to strata, because people don't realize that a lot of this Epstein stuff that was floating around for a long time, just because somebody rode on Epstein's airplane doesn't mean that they were affiliated with Epstein. They all ride on each other's airplanes and boats all the time. Right. And if you run in those circles,
very common,
you're going to go to parties and social events with those people. So that's not an indication that they were actually affiliated. Now,
proximity is not affiliation.
Yes. Thank you. You said that way better. See, you said that 4 words. It took me an hour and a half.
There are 2 examples really of this strata that you and EM Burlingame are talking about that you can actually study. Everybody talks about the mafias, this, that, and the other. Look at the Korean chaebol and the Japanese keiretsu. Those are the power families that control all of the corporations at like the ultimate level, like LG. The police in Korea cannot arrest the son of a chaebol member. And these chaebols are tiered. So there's the top of the chaebol that are completely untouchable, and then there's the bottom of the chaebol who are only sort of mostly untouchable, and every level in between. And the Japanese keiretsu has the exact same model. Everybody talks about the Japanese yakuza. I mean, they're effective and they do what they do, but the keiretsu are the ones that nobody ever talks about. And it's the same with the chaebol. They're easy to find, they're easy to study, and you can study those power structures looking at them. And then I haven't tried to apply it over here. It was part of my job when I was in the military overseas, was studying these guys. But I haven't applied it here in the U.S. yet. But those 2, the Korean chaebol and the Japanese keiretsu, you can study the way those power structures are built and then look at what we've got here and what they have in Europe. I'll bet you they line up very nicely.
I'm waiting for Michael Yon to chime in on that one. He's sitting in Japan right now. I think you might have a perspective on it.
Oh, I mean, this is a place of deep, social structures. It's quite fascinating. Well, the United States is as well. But one thing is really important, by the way, is I wouldn't flippantly throw around ideas about doing a kill order on people. That could get us all in trouble, flippantly saying those things. And so I'm going to have to say explicitly, I'm not in that. Right.
Yeah,
I wanna-
thanks for
that's
correcting
super-
me on that. Yes,
right,
we're not
yeah,
advocating violence here. That's
Yeah, that's
I'm a fat old
right.
chicken farmer. I'm not going after anybody anytime soon.
Yeah,
yeah.
and
Let me
not
retract that
endorsing it
statement
and
say
not
that
encouraging it. And
No.
yeah, not endorsing, not encouraging, not in. Right. So, but yeah, these structures are so old around the world. It's, of course, the Japanese were more insular up until a certain point, especially until the 1850s. But then we started taking their students over, and the capture started to begin. There's a lot of strange things, for instance, about the atomic bombings. Like, how did those B-29s actually get through unopposed? Nobody even rose up to shoot them down in broad daylight, right? I had a Japanese intel guy sitting right here, and I did an interview with him in my own studio, and he's talking, and that's the question, like, how did they, on the Nagasaki attack, he said, he interviewed some of those guys years ago, some of the Zero pilots. He said that some of the Zero pilots down in Nagasaki, on the day of the attack, they were running up a hill for exercise. They were away from their fighter aircraft, which was strange. Like, why were they away from their fighter aircraft? They were actually running up a hill at Nagasaki, and near, it's a sort of a punch bowl town if you've been there. But it's interesting, and he's like, how did they get through our ground defenses? Nobody shot at them from the ground. No Zeros rose up to shoot them down. And the Zero pilots is like, that's easy to shoot down a single B-29. They would do it all the time because they would send single B-29s in for reconnaissance, right? And so they could get up there and swat them down like mosquitoes, but they didn't. They let both of those came in. Strange. There's a lot more than meets the eye. Like Warplane Orange was a long, long time coming.
Lots of questions.
Yep.
Have we talked about Belfast and Ireland yet?
I was having a good conversation with myself on mute there for a second. I was going to ask him, what's the prevailing thought process in Japan about that? I mean, you've talked you think they were told to stand down? You think the orders, because we were doing firebombing raids up until the point where we dropped the atomic bomb. I mean, we were doing daily.
There's a lot of mysteries. Like, for instance, why when Japan attacked Pearl Harbor, did they not hit the fuel? I mean, that would make sense. And also, why didn't they hit Panama? And actually, I mean, they should have hit the canal. The opening attack would have hit the canal, right? We had clearly infiltrated the Japanese government. It was deeply infiltrated before World War II.
Yes.
It's a fact. I tell you what, at some point, I need to pull out some of my maps here that I have of Japan that we had mapped, the United States had mapped in the 1800s and in the early 1900s. Like, for instance, in the early 1900s with the Panama Canal, or sort of it's called the Isthmian Commission, actually. I've got a ton of these maps. These are priceless. And actually, I've been getting a bunch of them framed. Some of them are like, huge. And these were made by the Panama Canal Commission. But when you're mapping out, when they're mapping out places like Philippines, Korea, China, Australia, here in Japan, they're mapping out where the gold is, where the silver is, where the copper is, where they grow hemp, where they grow rice. And it's not where the people are. This is global, right? So that, like, the Isthmian Commission, fascinating. I got all their original report to Congress maps, and it's just absolutely fascinating how, like, when you look at the Panama Canal, it was not just building a canal; it was building a structure, like how to connect Uruguay with Japan, like when they had the the 1916 World Fair, right? And there, I got those old books, and like, this is how you can use the canal to get over to, from between Uruguay and Japan, right? All these things, they were worked out well in advance. It's fascinating. I wish you guys were all over here and we had like a week and we could just pull out the maps on the tables and
I'm so game.
and look at this.
I don't fly anymore, but I would be so game.
Let me show you this.
The question.
This is
I
from
have too.
1887. You know what this is? This is the Corinth. You know the Corinth Canal. the Corinth Canal over in Greece. This is one of their financial instruments, raising money to open the Corinth Canal. Yeah, it's fascinating. When you look at this on a global picture, it looks very different than just looking at it. Oh, and then they opened the Panama Canal. This is part of a huge structure, building the railroads, those 3 railroads, and I've got all the original reconnaissances and reports to Congress from Seward and Commodore Perry and all those guys, all the railroads. I got all the original books. You can sit here and look at these things for weeks, and it starts to, then you start to look at what's happening in the Middle East now. Yeah. People ask me what I think of peace talks. I'm like, if anybody's talking about peace talks, they're not even serious people. I mean, that's like there's no peace talks, man. That's just popcorn to the crowds. No, they're going to go to war, right? It doesn't matter if you kill everybody in all of those countries. The next people that get there are going to be at war for them too, right? All those countries, except for Persia, let's say Iran, all the Gulf state countries are synthetic countries. They were manufactured, and they are. I call them the 1922 synthetics.
You must have been listening. I know you weren't, but I just said this at 4:00 on my show. They're all made up.
Yeah,
they're all synthetic.
Yes,
and even the United States is synthetic. Our country is synthetic. Our country is a product of globalism.
The kingdoms that the people that are sitting there all picked out. They were just the tribe that got picked at a particular time.
That's it.
The whole thing's made up.
Percy Cox took his crayons out and a bottle of wine probably and said, "Okay, that's Kuwait, that's Bahrain."
I think it was much more nefarious than that, especially in modern day Africa. I think they actually did it on purpose in how they carved out, especially in the Middle East, religious. The whole boundaries was to divide, and it's most illustrative in Pakistan, where you just steal shit from both sides and create a whole country out of whole cloth. And they did it so that they divided tribes. So you have instant conflict. So you have a tribe.
They're clear. That's obviously why they did it. Like that's nakedly obvious, and they would say that. That's why. Yeah, I mean that's super clear. Like Percy Cox and all those. That's what they were doing.
Forevermore, you have war on demand. Anytime that you want to have conflict in a particular area to exploit it or whatever, those boundaries were drawn to enable them to flip the light on and say there's going to be a war here.
Yeah, press the right button at the right time, and the right desired outcome happens right away without delay or negotiation. And
especially if you have your paramilitary people pre-positioned there.
Yeah.
In regards to the Middle East, the only 2 countries that were originally there, and you can find record of them up to 3,000 years ago, is Jordan and Syria. All the other ones. Jordan is all the way back 3,000 years. We're going to debate this one. Maybe not on this show, but
not the current Jordan.
Okay. Not the current Jordan.
Yes.
Not the current
There were
Jordan.
people there. There were people there, but
you can find names. You can find names. You can't find the countries.
The Kingdom of Jordan and the Kingdom of Syria are all the way back 3,000 years.
But not the current Jordan and not the current Syria.
That's fine. The lines that are drawn on the maps right now, I'll agree with that.
Yeah.
I'll agree with that. North Korea and South Korea. Do you know how that happened? Do you ever hear that story? This is a true story. Okay, I heard this from General Paek Sun-yup. His office happened to be next to the civil affairs office I was working out of. When the ceasefire happened, when the armistice happened, and they needed to find a boundary, 2 captains in Washington, D.C. at like 3:00 in the morning opened a National Geographic magazine and were looking at a map of Korea, and they're like, okay, 38th parallel. And that's it. That's how that division came to be. That's why it's the 38th parallel. 2 young, panicking captains at 3:00 in the morning.
Well, if you go back to the original after World War II, you know that you know how after every war, the winning side gets to put in people that control the area. Like we did in Germany, we divided it up, and the Soviets got one part, the British got one part, we got one part. You know how they do that, and then they put a governor in charge of it and that type of thing. That's where the original post World War II boundary was as well. And the northern sector was under, if I remember right, it was under the Soviet Union, and we had the southern sector. And we had a governor, and we had the military commander in there, and their job supposedly was expelling all of the Japanese, because it had been a former Japanese colony, and that we did a lot more extracurricular activities post World War II. And there was a lot of indigenous people in South Korea that had not left and had fought the Japanese. They'd been fighting the Japanese the entire time that they were a colony of Japan. And one of the co-missions of the southern sector that we controlled was to get rid of all of the nationalists that wanted a unifying election, because we'd already decided they weren't going to be unified. We weren't going to let them be one country. They weren't. We did the same thing when we decided to let France come back into Vietnam. We could not stand the thought of them having Vietnam for Vietnamese, and we agreed to allow the French to come back. The French wasn't there. They didn't have both the North and South. It was divided the same way. China supposedly got, which was actually Chiang Kai-shek, got the North, and because we didn't recognize mainland China. And I believe it was the UK that had the South as the governorship, kind of, to get all the Japanese out. And they collectively decided that the French was going to be able to recolonize it. It's really a fascinating, I didn't know any of this. And again, I got all this academic shit, graduate of Air War College, and didn't learn a freaking real thing about history.
Well, it's, again, like you said, you're being curated for a very specific post at a very specific time through a very specific curriculum. So, and by the way, I got to say thanks to Michael for bringing us back on track. I sometimes I forget I'm on air when I'm talking. So, thanks for bringing.
Look, these books, by the way, are from 1855, and they are about building a canal through Israel.
Imagine
from
that.
1850. Yeah, and it's by they're by a guy named William Allen, Captain William Allen, Royal
building
Navy.
a canal through Israel in 1855.
Yep,
I need to see those.
It's got maps in there. I put them on my Substack recently. It's got the maps in there actually. And
Does it go through Gaza?
Is that in focus?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah, if you screenshot, you could find it on archive.org and see the maps that I've gotten here. But the idea, and it's still an idea, is there's the Ben Gurion Canal. That's a different idea, actually, because there's been multiple ideas for building path between Israel. So, but this is about going, making that route to India. Of course, the Suez didn't open until 1869, right? So, and this is 1855. So this is 14 years before, right?
That's
great. So this guy, he did a real proper reconnaissance and study here. And I mean, ethnographic and everything. But the idea was, if you build from, the Gulf of Aqaba down to the Dead Sea is the lowest place on earth, right? Mm-hmm. And so if you can just dig a little bit through the Gulf of Aqaba area, and then a little bit up, I think Haifa would be where it would come out, or that area. And so, but most of it's downhill. So if you do a little bit of the digging, the water would fill in the blanks, right? And then you could go ahead.
Mike, could you give me the title of that book, please?
Yeah, it's 2 books. It's 2 volumes, actually. It's called The Dead Sea, A New Route to India. And it's a fascinating book. It's unbelievable. I think once you get it, it's by Captain William Allen, Royal Navy.
Bound.
It's super interesting. You can get on archive.org, but
No, that's where I am right now. That's where I am right now.
But I happen to find a couple actual copies from the time, and so they got the map. The original maps are in here. I can't fold them out because my camera's not working up there. I'd fold them out and show you, but it doesn't work because I can't put two cameras on this. But so what he's talking about is they call it the Med Dead Red route, or the Red Dead Med route. So in other words, from the Red Sea to the Dead Sea to the Med, right? So, but and that's still an idea. Like later, Theodore Herzl thought about doing that to also just to make it energy, make it not necessarily a canal, but for energy, because the Suez Canal was open before Theodore Herzl started to come on the stage. But also the idea that he talks about here is if you open up that canal through the Med Dead Red, you would open up that back area as well, right? So to open up more of the land, you can get direct access from the sea, because there's a lot of minerals and all kinds of things out there. I mean, Israel is a lot more than just, it's not a holy land. That's not what it's there for. Yeah, it's a holy land for that reasons, but that's not what this is about. This is about, that happens to be like Panama on steroids, right? And I mean, there's a lot of stuff there, and the location is absolutely vital. That's why I think we're going to end up seeing, like, you see the Trump doing the thing, the family over at the Adriatic Sea at the with Albania. But I think you're going to. I bought this share for the Corinth Canal, a while back, and just to remind me, sooner or later we're going to see the Corinth Canal in the news, like screwworms. You know what I mean? Sooner or later, this thing's going to be in the news, and because if you look at where that island is, and you look at the sea routes, they'll go right through there. And
just as an example, the area you're talking about there, look into the trade history, the ancient trade history of the cities of Accra and Tyre. Those two cities alone,
man.
It's just those two cities.
And by the way, Michael called the screwworm stuff in 2023.
No,
2021. I remember that.
I think I recall that.
It was 2021. 2021. I started calling it publicly in 2021, in June of 2021.
Yeah, but I didn't interview you until 22 or 23. I can't remember.
It was obvious. You know what happened? It was Masako and I were in a meeting with a Intel guy down in Panama, American guy, and he told us about the screwworms. And I was like, screwworms? Wait a minute. No sooner did we leave that meeting, I contacted the screwworm people, because I said to Masako, you know what? Those are going to end up back in the United States. I mean, that was just a flash of light. It didn't take 8 years of study. I'm just like, I know how this crocodile hunts. If you tie a dog to the tree next to the river, the crocodile will get the dog, right? As an alligator hunter, I can assure you this will happen. And
are we going back to cannibals again? Because we're not doing cannibals
Michael's talking my language. He's from Florida. He's from right here.
I know. I remember the conversation.
Yeah, we know. We know all about alligators.
Oh yeah, I used to hunt them right there and all over the place, Winter Haven, and I used to eat them up.
Just for our guys, there are 3 Florida guys in here because I'm from Miami. So,
for Christ's sake,
almost counts. It's
my sister lives in Boca. Does that count?
Fort Lauderdale.
We call Miami North Cuba. Sorry.
Yeah. Miami.
Well, actually, I was born in Little Havana. Yeah, I was born in Little Havana. There you go.
Best I could do as a sister in Boca.
I actually just way off subject. If you remember Adam Walsh, he lived down the street.
Oh yeah. Wow.
But keep in mind, but when this is going on, this is before big oil. This is before Suez. This is before that place had been a place of much war and action for it. We can't even track back how far it goes. Yeah. It's a standing war. It just will be war. And then there's this process wars too, which is separate but related, right? So you see, for instance, the island that the Trump's architecture is moving to buy and to control, the passage there. the Strait of Otranto, right between Adriatic and Ionian seas, right? I mean, that's if you look at that strait, that'll go right. Some of the traffic will go right through this canal. That's why I got this thing way back when. And then suddenly I'm like, there they are. They're actually buying the island. You know, it's like another screw-worm thing. I've got all these private predictions I never published because, you know, it's just too much. But I mean, but again, I had bought this knowing sooner or later you're going to see this in the news, the Corinth Canal, right? It's not a major one. It's not like Panama Canal or Suez or whatever. But it's one of those little things that you would take in the process of a much larger thing. Yeah.
So interesting.
Mike, real quick before I forget, it's there. I threw a link to a firsthand account of a Japanese ambassador to Mexico in the private chat for the studio, and I thought you'd get a kick out of that. It's from 1620. It's the actual records of a Japanese ambassadorship to Mexico in 1620.
That was the first. That was actually the first mission. When the
He already knows about it. Of course he does.
Yeah, that was the first. Yeah, that was the first like overseas mission by a Japanese ambassador. That was it. Yeah. Ended up in America. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we're coming up on 2 hours, and I want to get to the UK and the stuff going on in Belfast. I want to get both Colonel Watkins. I want to get Michael. I want to get your take on that because you and I have personally talked about Ireland popping off for the last almost 3 years now, and I want to get your take on what's going on right now.
Yeah, Misako and I went to Ireland maybe 4 years ago. It was after the screwworm thing. We're like, these screwworms are going to come. Let's go to Ireland. You know, so we went over to Ireland because we could see Ireland is going to be on the menu. And so, you know, we started publishing. I think they're going to take it. You know, and I was down in Argentina, actually, and Ivor Cummins, and if you know Ivor Cummins, pretty well-known podcaster, and we were down there with Doug Casey, and there's a condominium or whatever you want to call it. It's huge. in Buenos Aires. And anyway, Ivor and I both spoke at this thing, and I said, I think they're going to go for Ireland. And now the crowd at that speaking event were looking at Ivor and Ivor didn't know, and he's from Ireland. He lives in Ireland at that time, right? And that was just like a year and a half ago. He didn't know, and he, like a lot of people, he's a very smart guy, but like a lot of people, sometimes it's hard to imagine something if you can't imagine the other person's motivation, right? So like that can't be happening because I'm not saying Ivor said this, but many people would say about Ireland in the past did say, they're not going to do that to Ireland because I can't imagine why they would do it. And I'm like, your imagination has zero to do with this. You know what I'm saying? I am telling you, they're going to take Ireland, right? Or at least they're going to get into a big war to get it. Whatever your imagination tells you is one thing. This is war. You know what I mean?
Who are you referring to as they are going to take?
They are the normal globalist architectures that you talk about on a daily basis. It's some amorphous thing that we can't, you know, and oftentimes that's another one too. As you know, often since we can't actually put a specific name to it, then people will go, it can't be true then. I'm like, what? Okay, eight banks got robbed here last week, but I can't imagine why they would do that. And I don't know who did it. So therefore the banks didn't get robbed. Right. It's like the banks clearly got robbed. I can't imagine why they did it other than they wanted the money. But and why would they do Ireland? Ireland's choice real estate for many reasons, right? And Panama, oh my gosh. I mean, there's no chance Panama gets out of this intact, you know, or Ireland. And so anyway, we went to Ireland and we were hanging out with Mary Lou McDonald, that leader of Sinn Féin. What a goofball. I mean, that lady, I mean, we're walking down the street with her in Dublin at night and everybody's like, Mary Lou, and everybody wants to see Mary Lou, you know, Mary Lou McDonald. So we end up in a bar, of course. I don't drink, but we're in a bar because it's Ireland. And yeah.
Zero stereotype there. Zero.
It's real. And so it's straight up real.
No,
There is no
I know.
steroid.
That's
Yeah,
why I'm
there's
saying
no-
that, because I know you're right.
yeah. And so anyway, I brought up the food to Mary Lou, like, you could end up getting in the food crisis here. And anyway, look at these invasion. And she's like, oh yeah, we're doing a good job. She was bragging about it, as they typically do. She's like, we're going to be able to increase the numbers. And I'm just like, what can you do? I mean, this is the
you see
dumbed
this-
down. Go ahead.
So do you see this though? Because I'm watching this from, I look at it with suspect eyes, right? So it starts with the social media post of this guy stabbing the dude in the face, and then miraculously they're burning and evicting illegals from whatever the housing is there. Police cars burn up. To me, that's all narrative. I don't see that as real. It looks like incitement ops.
It's not
look
strategic. It's not, in my other, I've got numerous large library rooms. Actually, I've got enough books to fill these whole shelves on Ireland. And it's all about famine. It's about Irish moving overseas. It's about there's about 12 or 15 books that have as part of the title, The Vanishing Irish. And and if you look up online, you'll see many books called The Vanishing Irish, or and so it's clear that the Irish have been being genocided for a long time, whether it's the famines or so many other things. This is a process. This is a good
point of order. There was never a true famine in Ireland. All of their food grew perfectly fine. Their lambs were wonderful. Their pigs were good. It was just all taken away from the Irish, and they were only left with blighted potatoes.
That's normal. That's why
plenty of food in that country.
Yeah, that's normal. In 2020, when I started saying I think we're going to see famines in the United States, so many people would say, "Don't you understand? The United States is the biggest food producer in the world." And I'm like, I tell you what, you need to cease fire and go read about 20 books on famine, and then let's come back and talk about it. Because then you'll see that being a big food producer like Henan Province, China, or being Ukraine or being Ireland makes no difference on whether or not you're going into famine. It doesn't even seem to be related, weirdly. It's just being a huge food producer does not mean at all that you won't end up doing an Alex Jones and eating the neighbor, right? I mean, it's in Ireland is clearly, keep in mind, during the famine 1845-ish to 54-ish, it depends on where you want to put the bookmarks. People argue about it, but anyway, but some of the counties in Ireland were not in famine at all, and some had some food problems, but some counties were actually down to cannibalism. I mean, it was hardcore, and so they did have famine, but it was a war famine. It wasn't from the bad. I mean, they were surrounded by fish. I mean, it's Ireland, and they're in the sea. They had plenty of, and there were still people, when Mao had the big famines, they were still exporting cotton and that sort of thing during the famine. When I was in Iraq, I was in Iraq for 2 years, and one of the places I was at was Bakuba in Diyala province, right? And that's mostly Sunni, but there was a Shia run warehouse in Baghdad that was controlled. Now, keep in mind, Diyala province is one of the food baskets of Iraq, right? But they were starting to have food problems in Diyala province in about 2007. I wrote about it. And actually, that was when Petraeus told me about go talk to somebody. Next thing you know, I end up on this mission. And a U.S. unit from Bakuba with strikers went over to this food warehouse. And because the Shia did not want to release the food to the Sunni in Bakuba, right? They didn't want to release it. I was physically present with my video camera. And actually the commander, what was his name? He was a lieutenant colonel. He said, you hear those helicopters out there? We had like Apaches and OH-58s buzzing around and all that sort of thing. And strikers surrounded the warehouse. The commander, he said, you see that? He pointed at me, he said, millions of people are going to see your decision right now. You're either going to release the food, or all of Iraq is going to know you're starving the Sunni in Baghdad and Diyala. You're either going to release it of your own, or one way or the other, we're getting the food, right? but we want you to release it. He was very clear about it. And I published this. I think what was the name of the mission? Anyway, it's online. And so we ended up going back to Bakuba with like 80 semi truck full of food from that warehouse, like 80. It was a huge convoy, right? But what I'm getting to is Diyala, breadbasket of Iraq. They were having food shortage in 2007 in the middle of the war, and it took intervention from U.S. forces to get that food released. Otherwise, they would have ended up potentially in famine right where they produced the food. You can't make up this stuff. Happened right before my eyes. But they didn't. There was no famine, of course, because we intervened. But it could have happened.
Do you think that's what they'll do in Ireland again? The same kind of thing?
You're muted, Mike.
I think they'll genocide the Irish, which is what they're doing. That's a pretty safe bet because that's what they're doing, right? So it's not some of these bets that I make. It's not really a bet because it's actually doing. It's like predicting rain during a typhoon. So they are genociding the Irish. It's a soft genocide at this point. You know, soft genocide is where you kind of keep pushing them out, breeding them down, that sort of thing. And the hard genocides, obviously, where you come out with machetes or whatever. I think eventually they may go to hard genocide. And then when that's over, I think what will happen is the people that did the genocide will then be genocided. I think very similar is going to happen in Israel. I think that they'll use the Israelis to do all these sorts of things. And then the Israelis themselves will be by the larger structure genocided, right? And I don't mean by Arabs. They might use Arabs to do it, but it'll be the larger. I think the Zionists will kill a lot of the Israelis. And I know that doesn't sound like it makes sense, but actually it does. But I think
that makes perfect sense. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that the Zionists are going to genocide the Israelis after they've expended them sufficiently. And part of the genocide is expending them doing the things that they want them to do, like clear Gaza and clear Lebanon and go to war with, take out the energy and all over the Middle East and that sort of thing. I would not doubt if they eventually take out Mosul Dam. I'm not predicting that they'll do it, but I could see a coin toss on that they might eventually take out Mosul Dam, near Mosul, obviously, because I think that could lead to famines in Iraq, actually, and that could destroy significant parts of Iraq.
How do the Irish get in front of this? I mean, how do all of us get in front of this? But specifically the Irish, right now. I know Bracken's looking at this a lot.
Yeah, he called me this morning. Bracken called me this morning, actually. And in fact, I introduced Bracken to, the people he went to see in Ireland and picked him up at the airport. And so, I mean, years ago, I had the camps mapped out, that sort of thing, where they're building the camps. You look where the camps are, they're at the choke points. They're like where you could control Dublin. You should always make a map, obviously. Always start with a map. We all know that. We're military people. Just like maps. And once you map it out, often the story is pretty clear right there in front of you. But I think that they'll genocide Ireland and then they'll genocide those. It'll be like exchanging the hermit crab because they want that land. And the same I think will happen in Panama. You'll end up the Panamanians. I've told the Panamanian people in the government and others down there, I'm like, you better be very careful. You are a piece of steak, or let's say you've got pork chops and steak hanging around your neck, and you are surrounded by bears and tigers, and they're gonna. You need to be really wise on the decisions you make. Yeah, I mean they know that they are sitting on massive copper when copper is massively important. They're sitting on massive everything, including that's where a lot of the fiber optic cables land, and building the route down through Colombia and energy and so many other things. Panama is a jewel, and so there'll be a standing war there. There's been European involved war ever since for 500 years. And I can only wonder about the war before that it's unrecorded. It's got to be ongoing. but certainly since 500 years, Balboa and all those guys, those wars have been and never ending. That's where the Scottish, I mentioned before, that's where the Scottish went bankrupt, was when they tried to make a path between the seas in the 1690s. So they went bankrupt and trying to make down in Darien. Actually, the route that the Scottish picked was a really fine route. They picked well. They're smart people. And in fact, that was almost the route where we built the canal. It was where the Scottish had the route that they want to build. They didn't want to build a canal. They wanted to build just like using mules and Indians and that sort of thing to cart between ships. And I've got there a lot of the old maps, and I've got a book where the Scottish are, and the book is from about 1700 or 1699 or 1701. It's about right there, and it's where the Scottish are really angry that the Spanish and the English had basically destroyed their project for the route between the seas. But the Scottish went bankrupt trying to make that route over the Darien Isthmus, down in the Darien Gap, where it's Darien Gap now. And they went bankrupt, and then that's why England absorbed Scotland. That's why the United Kingdom was formed. United Kingdom was formed after Scotland went bankrupt. They called it the Darien Scheme. It was 2 missions, about 2,000 dead. The Spanish and the English got in the way so that they didn't succeed, and the mosquitoes didn't help, and that sort of thing. And although the Scottish, man, I tell you what, they gave it a good college try. They really honestly gave it a good, hard, and they almost pulled it off, but almost doesn't count. And they ended up bankrupt, and now you have the United Kingdom of England and Scotland instead of the United Kingdom of Scotland and England. Because if the Scottish had succeeded, who knows what would have played out? Maybe they would have then absorbed England at some point. I don't know.
So because we're a little over 2 hours. My question is do you see this expanding this year, or do you see this going into 27, 28 before we start to see, real genocide over there?
It's a process. And so it's already happening. You say real genocide, I think you mean like, machetes and AK-47s or something like that, right?
Yeah.
It could happen at any time. I mean, I don't know though, because it's a process, right? It's like building the Panama Canal, it's like, or building when you think about it, it is exactly like building the Panama Canal. First, there's a huge planning phase, and then there's the assembling the capital phase, right? And then there's the, getting there, and you wouldn't believe these reconnaissances I have of the Panama Canal project. They're unbelievable. The reconnaissances, I mean, reconnaissances down in Colombia, multiple places in Panama, Nicaragua, like very detailed reconnaissance I have, right? Like not like that, but like, and then Mexico and all these different places they're looking at. So that took decades of doing all those recons and super studies of every little river and how they flood and all these different things. Where's the coal? How much smoke does the coal give off? So many different things, right? Just a huge amount. You know how those Navy guys do studies, man. Those Navy guys know how to do studies. And like Seward, he did his study of Panama in 1872, and I have the original. And that's the guy that went to Alaska and was talking about Greenland and all that stuff. And so he was a serious man. But what I'm getting to is that was a long process. And then the French come and they succeeded in Suez. They tried in Panama, failed, went bankrupt. The United States comes in. So many people had tried to make a path between the seas, and actually did. I mean, the railway was already operating, right? So that path was operating since 1855 or so. And I think roughly 1855. I've got the original studies and papers on that as well. But the point is that was a long process. It took literally centuries ultimately. But finally, when they really get down to doing the studies and then finally completing in 1914, that took arguably 60 years, arguably, or more. So look at Ireland in that process. I mean, when are they going to go to hatchets and machetes? And I don't know. But I mean, it's just At some point, though, it's just it'll come in its course at this rate. It's part of a large process, and the only way that to stop that is for people to just stand up and stop it. You have to stop it yourself. No, it's not going to stop if people don't stop it.
Yeah.
And that requires, and a lot of this is part of the setup too, right? The setup of making men more effeminate, where they won't stand up and stop things. They won't even go look. I mean, people in Ireland that did not even know this was a thing until 6 months ago. There's people that live right by the camps. Literally, I mean, we went over there. They live right there, and they're like, "Oh no, it's just some newcomers." They are going to kill you, right? That's what they're here for. They're not here to live in peace and wait your tables. They're here to take your house and to get rid of you, and then they'll be gotten rid of, and then your house will be bulldozed, and it'll be a nice, vista for some trillionaires, right?
Yeah, that's what I asked the question for that reason, because I knew you would get there. And that's typically, again, when this all kicked off, my phone, my email, my all my social media blows up. People asking, is this going to be kinetic? And I see a bunch of narrative. I don't see anything happening until 27, 28. I see continued skirmishes, for lack of a better word, to set conditions. Like this whole verdict down in I think it was in Georgia, or kid was sentenced to 35 years, and they're trying to blow it into a race war and create some kind of racial division. I see the thing in Belfast the same way.
Now keep in mind, by this time next year, certainly by the end of 2027, I think that there's a high chance we're going to have a lot of food problems in the world. We'll see how it plays out, because you never know until it comes, but conditions are being set for famines around the world, and how that plays out in Ireland, I don't know. But keep in mind, at any point, shipping could get interrupted, and they'll have food problems in Ireland. It's easy to do. It's easy to put places in food, and they've been setting conditions for years to make people food fragile.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah. They've been just so everybody's tracking. They've burned how many processing plants since 2020? I go back to 2017 is when it really started. Yep. They burned at least 250 food processing plants. They just shut down Del Monte. They're burning cattle processing plants. They burned grain elevators. You name it, across the gamut. They've destroyed food production and storage capabilities for the past 7-8 years to set conditions for the famine that we've been talking about now for, you talked about this, I think, back in last September, Michael. I think that was the first time you said it. And
I was talking about it in 2020. I've talked about it thousands of times since 2020.
Yeah.
It's clearly coming.
Yeah. We all agree to that. So, all right, we're at 2 hours and 15 minutes. Any final comments before we wrap this up?
Well, all of our families have been through this stuff, and we're still here.
Yeah. Words to live by. Steve, you got any last comments here?
I could go on for hours, but my wife would not approve.
Colonel Johnson?
My thought, being of at least partly Irish extraction, is I think eventually they're going to let loose. I don't think they'll wait forever.
They better start letting loose.
Yep. I think it'll be unpredictable. The problem I see, along with lines of what Mike is saying, is I feel like they're going to go off too unpredictable, and they won't be organized, and they'll be easily crushed. That's my fear.
I think we'll see a couple iterations, right? Typically how these things go is they'll be asymmetric, and then it'll be organized. And I think they're trying to draw out the asymmetric players right now so they can send a message to the rest of the population that they're going to crush it. Because if you look at Starmer's rhetoric and the rhetoric in the Irish Parliament, they're all saying the same thing. We're going to handle this aggressively, and there won't be any tolerance for it, et cetera, et cetera.
I think, if I was, I think like Conor McGregor, man, that guy, he's been speaking out. He needs to put the word out like, hey, all you Irish in America and everywhere else, we need your help. Send American Irish guys over here and help us. Something like that. I think you can't rule out things like that happening.
Yeah. Have you seen that big medical warehouse fire going on?
No, is that current?
Yeah, I mean it's pretty significant, and it's in California and Tracy, but look at it, it's massive. And how does a warehouse like that just catch on fire all the way across the warehouse? I don't know. I mean,
a fire will double in size every 2 to 5 minutes.
Oh yeah, I mean I know those internal fires, but it's just amazing that you would think that they would have fire suppression that should at least I don't know.
Yes. Yeah.
There's
so
a lot
that
of
brings me to
going on.
That brings me to my point I wanted to make to you. You've got a lot of valuable books, and being the fire chief here and safety prevention officer that I used to be and all that stuff, you need to make sure you've got a damn good fire suppression system in your house.
I do. Fire extinguishers everywhere.
Well, fire extinguishers it's not going to, you need to look at a whole house system somehow. Because you're not, I did firefighting for 33 years. And I've seen a lot of precious and valuable stuff go up in smoke. And that's how I view your library. And just because it's just who I am, I always worry about.
I get it. I get it. It's on my mind too. I've seen a lot of it happen too. I totally agree. I won't be staying here actually. Yeah. I'll be moving to a different place in short order, and this is on my mind.
Okay.
Is a way so that if there is a fire, the library part is more contained on its own, right? Yeah.
And some sort of dry chem system or CO2 system. I'm not sure what kind of laws, fire laws, chemicals and stuff could be used over there, but I would say look into it. I mean, I've given advice to many of the guys in the roundtable. They're asking me. But
so it's
that's my opinion.
And it was reported 2 hours ago, and it's the biggest, according to, again, I'm seeing this on X. This is the biggest medical distributor across the country.
Tracy, California. I'm looking at it right now. That's why my head's over here.
Yeah, that's what I'm looking at.
Look at that fire, fire chief. Please look at that. Look at that. Look at that. And look at that through your professional eyes, and look how big that thing is. I mean, you would think somehow they, something that's valuable, they would be able to at least contain that thing. That's gone.
Well, the question is I mean, think about the timing of this, right? That was your original point. The timing is it's suspect it goes along with the food production, right?
Yep. Yeah, knocking out the
you take out food, you take out medical supplies. I mean,
hey guys, apparently this is multiple warehouses. This is not a single facility burning here.
Yeah.
So that's definitely an action.
Well, we got a fire guy here. He could answer the question.
So I would suspect that, if it's multiple buildings that are not connected, especially, medical storage facilities, so forth, being metal, I would suspect, arson. And, arson, it's interesting that arson is, I guess it depends on what communist state you're in anymore, but arson used to be some of the harshest punishments in sentencing from a judge, more than rape or murder. People spent a lot more time in jail for arson. But
wife
yeah,
is texting me. She used to sell pharma wholesale. She apparently knows who these guys are. She says they have 49 other warehouses across the country. So, I mean, at least there's 49 others, but keep an eye on that shit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, gentlemen, I'm going to pop off. Thank you
Yep.
very much for
It's a
having me on.
Good
I
point to wrap
appreciate
it up. Yep.
Yeah.
Good to see
Thanks,
you all
Ben.
again.
Yep. We'll
See
be
y'all.
back
Yeah.
next week. God bless
you.
everyone. One team, one fight.
Take
Thank
care.
you, guys.